Welcome. In these videos, I'm going to do my best to cover some aspects of historical texts that seem to give people problems. Because so many people have issues reading the classics, my goal is to make reading theory less intimidating and more accessible. Today we'll discuss Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Frederick Engles, published in 1880 as a response to the anti-Marxist writer Eugen During. The text takes a materialist approach to explain how and when utopian socialism came about and describes in detail why utopianism is doomed to failure. Some of the people mentioned in the text are Düring, Henri de Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, and Charles Fourier. Eugen Düring was a German anti-Semite and anti-Marxist utopian socialist. Düring believed that the goals of the capitalist and proletariat classes were not necessarily opposed, and that the two groups could work together to establish a more just society. Because this is wrong, Engels was forced to spend this book refuting his claim and explaining why capitalists and workers are fundamentally opposed to each other, just as masters and slaves and lords and peasants were. The three utopians mentioned most in the text are Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, and Charles Fourier. Don't worry too much about their biographies, just know that they used an idealist approach to explain morally or logically why we needed socialism, and that they sought to emancipate not only the worker from capitalism, but all mankind, including the capitalists. Okay, so that is the people you need to know. Now there are some terms you might also want to know before diving in. To understand the text, you should know what is meant by utopian socialism, as well as the differences between idealism and materialism, and the difference between a metaphysical versus dialectical analysis. Utopians also use an idealist approach opposed to a materialist approach. They believe that changing the minds of a few great men can change the world in what is essentially the unfolding of some higher truth. Materialists believe the opposite. Changing material conditions is what changes our minds, which are just the internal representation of those outside conditions. An idealist would believe that the American Northerners wanted to abolish slavery because they were more moral or smarter than the Southerners before the Civil War. A materialist can observe that the abolitionist sentiments only arose once the North had industrialized to the point where owning a slave was no longer more profitable than hiring a worker. The material conditions of industrialization and capitalism gave rise to the idea that slavery was immoral. Utopians also take a metaphysical approach. This means they analyze things in isolation. Because of this, they fail to see how class struggle relates to climate change, for example. Metaphysicists also think that change can only happen as quantitative growth. This leads to the belief that we can grow capitalism into something better. Because of this, they fail to see that the transition from capitalism to socialism requires a fundamental break in the system. Scientific socialists, on the other hand, use a dialectical approach. This allows us to see how all things are connected, influencing each other, and constantly changing. A metaphysical analysis only sees quantitative growth, so it can't see the link between a caterpillar and a butterfly. A dialectician understands that through qualitative change, a caterpillar gives way to a higher level of existence, the butterfly. This clumsy metaphor shows the caterpillar as capitalism and the butterfly as socialism, in case you missed it. This is why only scientific socialists understand the need for qualitative change in society. We realize we cannot grow into socialism, but instead must make a fundamental change that breaks the old society to create the new. I truly hope this was a useful video for you and made the text easier to read.